You know, there have been a lot of comparisons made between this season of NASCAR racing and the 2015 season of NASCAR racing, and they haven't all been positive comparisons, but the similarities are apparent nonetheless, and none more so than the Championship 4 we have going into the Ford Ecoboost 400 at Homestead Miami Speedway. And I'm going to talk about the comparisons between this season and 2015 in a lot more detail in just a few minutes. But first I want to preview the Championship 4 and why only the Championship 4 for an entire race. Well, honestly, a bandwagoner's guide or something like I do for some of the bigger races doesn't really apply here, because really the only thing that matters is the Championship 4, and frankly that's the only thing that anybody cares about. I mean, look no further than Kyle Larson literally pulling over for Jimmie Johnson in 2016 because he wasn't in the chase and Jimmie Johnson was. Regardless, we're going to talk about each of these Championship 4 drivers. I'm going to tell you about their history at Homestead, their potential at Homestead, and then talk about potential hurdles they're going to have to climb over during the course of this race based on some of the things that they've been struck with throughout the course of the season. It's actually going to be a pretty interesting look at this, because if you look at some of the patterns, there's definitely a clear pattern of what happens to some of these drivers in some of the big races, and it's fairly interesting. So we're going to start from the bottom and go to the top in terms of the drivers that I think have the best chance of taking the crown at the end of 400 miles, and the start, or the starting point I should say, is Joey Logano. And it's no disrespect to Logano, though some may think it is, to say he's the wild card in this particular round. A lot of people have been saying that, a lot of people think that, especially because his win at Martinsville. But legitimately, or at least in terms of the point standings, if we calculated the things based on 2003, so I don't know how legitimate that is anymore, but he is the fourth in the old system, the old point standings, behind the big three, who we'll be talking about later on in this video. Now, Logano himself hasn't made a whole lot of friends, and I think that's going to be something that particularly doesn't work in his favor. We're talking about, well, in particular during the actual playoff chase format, he has upset two drivers, and those being Aric Almirola and Martin Truex Jr. One of those drivers is in, one of those drivers is out, and I'm not sure which one is more dangerous to the potential of Logano going to victory lane, or at least taking the championship, because there is the potential that another driver could win the race and somebody else win the championship, though I don't think it's happened in this particular format. Aric Almirola is out, as we know, and obviously there's a teammate of his in the Championship 4, that being Kevin Harvick. So would he possibly get a team order to, if not wreck Logano, possibly upset Logano? We know that Almirola has been very fast throughout the season and actually has been improving throughout the season. So is there a possibility that he could be running up front in this race and possibly play the spoiler if it comes down to 2 or 3 guys involving Logano and Almirola up there racing for the championship? That's a distinct possibility. Then we talk about the potential of Martin Truex Jr. and what he may or may not be willing to do with Joey Logano. And I think Truex is probably the more dangerous of his two particular opponents, him being Joey Logano, because I think Truex really doesn't have a whole lot to lose. And we're going to talk about that later when I talk about Martin Truex Jr. But his team's closing down. He's moving on to a new team. He wants to go out on top, and if he can't go out on top, as he said, he won the battle, but he won't win that damn war. And I suspect it's going to come to blows, at least at some point during this race. Now, maybe Truex will race him clean, but then again, we saw what happened when Truex raced Logano clean at Martinsville. It didn't work out very well for him. And by the way, I don't really have necessarily a huge problem with Logano doing what he did at Martinsville, but as a strategic move for Logano trying to win this championship, I don't think it's a very smart one. And by the way, Joey Logano, of the 4 Championship 4 drivers, is the only one who has never won a race at Homestead Miami Speedway. Oh, and oh, by the way, the other 3 managed to win their races at Homestead Miami Speedway. They won them to win a championship. So that is definitely an uphill climb. The other 3 drivers are experienced in this format. They're experienced under this situation, and they've succeeded in this situation. So Logano being the kind of odd man out in terms of this equation certainly, I think, puts him at the back in terms of the I guess the Vegas odds. You would definitely put Logano at the back. Next up, we're going to talk about Kevin Harvick. And 2 weeks ago, I probably would have been picking him for the championship. But considering some recent events, I think Harvick's uphill climb is just that much more steep to get this championship. Now, of course, he did win it in 2014 with this no, it wasn't with this team. It was with RCR. I was thinking that. Wait a second. No. Yeah, so he has never won a championship with this team. It was Chevy power last time. It's Ford power this time. I don't think that really matters all that much. It seems like Stewart-Haas Racing has had a pretty good handle on everything in terms of setup, and the fact that he's going to have all the resources of the 4 cars essentially going to his, considering especially the fact that Kurt Busch and Eric Almirola were also getting playoff equipment throughout the last round of the championship. Now all those resources are going directly to Harvick. So there's an advantage there, but of course we know that his crew chief and his car chief are suspended. That's not going to help him very much, obviously, but the people he's got associated with him now, I believe, were running Kurt Busch's car when he won the Daytona 500 a couple of years ago. So, I don't think it's going to necessarily be a huge issue, and it's not as if the crew chief and the car chief don't have ways of or means of communicating if there's a problem or an issue that could come up. Now, one of the major problems, of course, going back to the fact that his crew chief and car chief are suspended, is the fact that Harvick has had a problem with legality and legal cars this season. We go back to Las Vegas with the roof caving in on that car, the rear window caving in on that car, which NASCAR determined garnered a penalty. Then we go to Texas, a similar situation. Rear spoiler was out of spec, and they took it back to the R&D center, tore it down, took away a win. Or didn't take away a win, but took away all the things associated with that win. So we go to Homestead Miami Speedway, 1.5 mile speedway, like those other tracks. And there's a potential here. I'm not saying it will happen. I'm not trying to be too much of a Jennifer Fryer here, but if Harvick wins the race, there's a potential that he could get it encumbered, and then what does NASCAR do? Do they take the championship away from Harvick? Because here's the thing that I don't know exactly what the rule on the books is here, but if Harvick gets encumbered, he loses all the points and everything, but points don't matter in this race. It's about the win. So what happens if the win is encumbered? I mean, I know I'm kind of grasping at straws here. It's kind of a hypothetical situation. But if Harvick gets the car encumbered, loses all the points, loses all the prize money, all that stuff, but he doesn't lose the win, that means he still wins the championship, right? So there's a potential that a car could cheat and win, or at least be out of spec and win, and he would keep the championship. That could be an interesting scenario, and that would be something to talk about in the offseason. But let's talk about a little bit more legit possibilities that Harvick could lose this championship in the win. And part of the reason why I put him at third is because it seems like even if Harvick has a dominant car, which he seems to have more often than not, it seems like his crew will lose him the race, or he himself will just have bad luck, like the flat tire at Phoenix. I think he had a loose wheel at the fall race in Las Vegas after being dominant. There's so many times where Harvick has been up front this season and hasn't been able to show the result for that effort. So, I mean, even if he dominates this race, about halfway through the race, he'll probably have a tire go down, or he'll probably have a lug nut off the car, or he'll have an uncontrolled tire. By the way, we're going to talk about uncontrolled tires a little bit later, because I'm having a feeling about one of these drivers that's not a good one. But there's a lot of things that can go wrong for Harvick here, and I think there's so many things working against him here that's going to be very difficult for him to capitalize and take the championship. So we move on to the sentimental favorite for the championship, and the guy, I think a lot of people, if you don't have a favorite driver in NASCAR, your favorite driver isn't racing for the championship, this is the guy you're pulling for. Martin Truex Jr., final race for Furniture Row Racing before Truex and his crew chief, Cole Pearn, move on to the 19 car for Joe Gibbs Racing. They're running a throwback paint scheme, though it's, only a throwback to like 2 years ago. Regardless, a lot of people pulling for him. He's a defending champion, defending race winner by default in that case. So there's a lot of things going for Truex here. I think Truex has got a really good shot. He's, again, the guy I think in my heart I want to see him win. I think a lot of people are very, I think it would be a great story. I think it'd be a great sports story. I don't know if NASCAR feels the same way about that. Truex has nothing to lose here, really, unless he takes out Kyle Busch. That's the one thing he could really lose, which would kind of upset his new team if he did so. But as long as he stays off of Kyle Busch, I think Truex really can do pretty much whatever he wants in this race, and it's really not going to have much of a consequence. Obviously, they don't have to worry about the engine. They don't have to worry about the chassis. They don't have to worry about the bodywork. They don't have to worry about any of that stuff because they don't have to do anything anymore because the car is going to be retired after this. But that being said, NASCAR, the organization or the organizing body, has nothing to gain from Truex winning this championship. In fact, they may have something to lose from Truex winning this championship. It's not because Truex going to back-to-back would be necessarily a problem for NASCAR. It's the fact that they're going to have to explain to people, well, the driver who won the championship is defending his crown, but the team isn't. And believe me, this is going to be an issue. And I just have a feeling. I just have that little, I don't want to put the tinfoil hat on too much, but I just have that nagging feeling in the back of my head. We're going to have a few uncontrolled tire penalties going towards Truex. There's going to be, maybe he's speeding in one of the zones on pit lane, or maybe he'll jump a restart. He'll go too early in the restart zone. Something like that. Something like that will happen to him. Maybe they'll send him to the back of the field. Maybe he'll have some no-no in qualifying, and he'll get in trouble. I have a feeling that if NASCAR can help it, they don't want Truex to win the championship because, again, optically, it's not as good as saying, whoa, even if Kevin Harvick wins, they can go, whoa, Kevin Harvick, look, Kevin Harvick and Stewart-Haas Racing, he's back. The explanation may, and the fact that we have to say this, and the fact that we have to think about this is a bit unfortunate just in general, just the whole situation, but it's worth bringing up, it's worth noting, because it may actually end up playing a factor. And finally, my choice, the person I think is actually going to win the championship, is Kyle Busch. And to tie it in to the beginning of the video, it's just like 2015. It's almost the exact same scenario as the 2015 championship if you look at it. It's the same three drivers as the big three: Kevin Harvick, Kyle Busch, Martin Truex Jr., and the Martinsville winner. In 2015, it was Jeff Gordon. This year, it's Joey Logano. Same situation. Of course, this season, Kyle Busch has actually run all the races, and if he won the championship, it would actually be legitimate this time. But regardless of that, I think Kyle Busch is in the best position here. He was actually the fastest car at the last year at Homestead Miami Speedway, at least on the long runs. I think they'll probably work with the car to get it better this year. And again, it just seems like Kyle Busch is kind of a big game kind of driver. He seems to step up in big events, and he really seems to come to the plate. Now, we know Kyle Busch is a hard racer. We know he's going to be up. I would guess he'd be up front all day. It will be interesting to see. Again, Logano is going to be an interesting clash with him. I think Truex is going to be nice to him. The question may be Kevin Harvick and Kyle Busch, how they may race together. But then again, I think they raced for the 2015 championship, and they were fairly clean. But it, again, was Busch coming out on top of that one. So there's a lot of things to think about here, and I really do believe... I think Kyle Busch is Kyle Busch the legitimate points? Regardless, I think Kyle Busch on a whole throughout the season has probably been the best driver, the best car combination, especially considering some of Harvick's extracurricular activities, whether or not they're actually intentional or not, who cares? How many wins has Kyle Busch had encumbered this year? Okay, so I think Kyle Busch, he's the guy. I think he's going to get it done. I think the smart money is on Kyle Busch. I think, again, the sentimental favorite is Truex. Harvick would win and then get it taken away, or maybe not get it taken away. Maybe taken away in the eyes of the fans. And Logano would be the miracle story, but it's not an impossible miracle story. It would just be something that would be fairly unexpected. By the way, if you're wondering, Xfinity Series, I believe, or at least my heart is with Hemrick, but my head says coleslaw. And then in terms of the Truck Championship, I think the head and the heart are both going with Johnny Sauter. I think it would be very difficult to beat him, especially considering I think he won 2 years ago in the championship, finished second last year. So that, and the fact that it's Johnny Sauter. The guy is a Terminator in trucks. But yeah, so that's my preview of the championship 4. What did you think about it? How do you feel? What are your predictions? Leave them down in the comments. Is this going to be a complete redo of 2015? That's kind of what I'm feeling. But then again, who knows? I could be completely wrong. So thank you guys so much for watching. This has been David Land on YouTube. Be sure to subscribe for more NASCAR Motorsports content. And we'll see you in the next video. Enjoy the championship weekend of NASCAR!